In a previous episode of CodeDependent, we saw how to use the animate filter effect for animating the properties of the new shader filter provided in Flash Player 10. And then we can incorporate the technologies of Pixel Bender for getting arbitrary displays, bitmaps on the screen, and effects for actually animating those properties over time and getting nice transition effects for doing things like crossfade. We're also using Pixel Bender shaders in other ways in some other built-in effects in Flex 4. So let's take a look at some of those right now. So I've got this application called Shader Transitions, which shows an image here. Picture is taken by my friend, Romain Guy. We'll give credit where credit is due. So as I click on this button, we go between states and we crossfade between these two lovely images of San Francisco. Right? And we can change the transition. We have a crossfade. We can do a wipe instead. We can wipe in different directions, wipe down, and wipe up. So for people that use wipe effects in Flex 3, this may not be news. We certainly had the wipe left, right, up, and down effects there, although we didn't have a crossfade. But what's actually going on under the hood is quite different. So let's take a look at the code. So we'll go in and see some states declared. This is how we declare states in Flex 4. We've got state 1 and state 2. We've got a transition declared to automatically run when there's any state transition, and it starts out with an effect of this crossfader effect that we've declared, but we're going to change that effect depending on which one people want. And then we have the declarations block here where we declare all of our non-visual components in Flex 4 markup. And we've declared two effects in here. We have a crossfade, which is a new effect in Flex 4. And it's got an ID of crossfader, and it's going to operate on two targets, the image that we saw there and also a button. I'll get to the button later. We have a wipe effect declared as well. Now, this is a change from Flex 3. In Flex 3, we had wipe left, wipe right, wipe up, wipe down. Here, we actually did a little bit of refactoring and said, there's a single effect called wipe, and you tell us which direction you want to go in. So we're going to declare it with an ID of wiper. We're going to operate on the same targets there. And then we have these radio buttons declared up at the top of the application that tell the application which effect you actually want to use during the transition. So, for instance, the radio button on the left is called cross button, and it's in the same group as everything else. And when someone clicks on it, it's going to call the change handler. Let's go ahead and look at the change handler up here. It says, okay, depending on which button was pressed, we're going to change the effect of the transition to the selected effect. And then in the case of the wipe effects, we're not only going to select the wiper effect, but we're also going to select the direction property of that wiper effect. So I said, as before in Flex 3, there were 4 different ones. In Flex 4, there's one wipe effect and one direction property to tell us which direction to take the wipe into. And then, as we click on either the image or the button, then we do a crossfade or a wipe, depending on which one you selected. And then how does that happen? So we change the current state, and the current state automatically runs the transition that we've declared, and the transition is going to run one of these two effects, either the crossfade or the wipe, and that will automatically animate the properties as declared in the crossfade and wipe effects. So it's all very simple, right? We're just running a crossfade, and then somewhere some alpha property is changing on something or other. Wipe, we're just doing a wipe between these two things. But what's actually going on under the hood is far more complex and therefore interesting to the engineers in the audience. We're actually running Pixel Bender shaders under the hood. So we have a crossfade shader that we ship with the SDK. We also have a wipe shader that we ship with the SDK. And then we set properties on those shaders. So for instance, the wipe actually exposes a direction property inside the shader itself, and we set the direction according to the direction property on the effect. And then when the wipe effect runs, we actually run the shader filter. We animate the properties of the shader filter over time, as we saw in the earlier episode on animate filter. And then the shader runs and actually gives us the effect we're looking for. Far different from what we were doing in Flex 3, where we were actually using mask effects instead. Now we have the power of Pixel Bender at our disposal, so let's go ahead and use it. So in most cases, you actually don't care about that. You just declare a crossfade effect and you run it, and it looks good, and it's very easy. You don't need to know that there's a shader under the hood. The important part to note, though, is that you can access it if you want. If you like the crossfade effect, go for it, use it. If you like the wipe effect, just go for it. Just run it out of the box. But the superclass of these effects is called Animate Transition Shader, and it's specifically an effect created for running transitions, and its whole job is to take a snapshot of an object before, a snapshot after, supply those two bitmaps into the shader that's been declared, and then animate a property called progress over time and modulate those two images over time and get you the end result. So what you can do is either run one of our canned effects that have canned shaders in them, or you can supply your own custom shader if you want, and then you can have us take the snapshot, supply it to your shader, and you get your own custom effect for the transitions instead. So the nuance here to note is that when I run this, sure, the image crossfades as you would expect and wipes, and that's all straightforward, but it's not just limited to images. You'll notice that the button that I'm clicking on is doing the same effect, right? So we've got wipes happening on the button, we've got crossfades happening on the button, and it's really the same thing. It doesn't need to be an image-based control, right? Instead, what we're doing is actually capturing bitmap images of controls, graphic objects, images. It really doesn't matter what. We get a bitmap before, a bitmap after, we supply those to the shader animates the progress value over time, and we get the animated effect we're looking for during the transition. Very powerful, very custom effects possible. This is just happening to use the standard canned effects that we ship with the SDK. If you want to check out the source code for this application or other related applications, go to my blog at graphics-geek.blogspot.com.